A very, very good afternoon. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to the very small seaside village of Verburg, about probably 5-6 kilometers that way. In fact, not even, about 4 kilometers that way is the significantly larger Peloponnese town of Kalamata, which in turn is about half an hour from the village from which you would have seen both of last week's show, the village of ancient Messini, the village that is my adopted Greek home, and where I spent some time both enjoying the ancient and very slow-paced life of a a village, a hamlet that is flanked by some of the great Grecian ruins. But for which also I was enjoying a great deal of Greek wine with my friend Yannis Astakonopoulos, the Greek sommelier who was on the show, my friend Nikos, the local taverna owner, and getting an update on Greek wine. In fact, that's what I've been doing again today. I spent this morning at Domaine Skouras. You might remember Dimitris Skouras was on the show last week telling us about some of his wine adventures and about this particular Greek harvest. And straight after the news, before we jump into the show proper, I'll show you a few pictures and tell you a little bit about my visit to Domaine Skouras a little earlier on today. And I'll be talking about more Greek wine this coming Thursday as we head off to Santorini and to Crete and to Macedonia and meet some winemakers from across this extraordinary wine producing country that is not just finding its feet, it is galloping forward in terms of the quality of production, but also just the revelry in producing wine from grapes that have such a long history. And as we've seen on this trip, on previous ones, there are terrific examples of grapes that we know from different parts of the world. I've had some lovely Tempranillo, some great Carignan, drinking some very good Greek Chardonnay early on today. But it is the homegrown grapes, the Asirtikos and the Zinomavros, the Chiriotikos, the Moscofileros, which is where Greece really comes into its own. And once again, on this particular trip, I've been enjoying some really good Greek wine, and we'll be back to that on Thursday. But today we celebrate an event for those of you who aren't sitting on an elongated Greek holiday, but are instead back in South Africa, and specifically in the greater Gauteng area, because it is the Ex Animo Wine Fair this coming weekend. It's an event that I'm missing again, unfortunately, at Victoria Yards, and it is one that sees the Ex Animo crew led by David Clarke come out en masse and showcase a range of really cool, interesting, exciting boutique wine, the kind of stuff you won't see on too many supermarket shelves. You'll find it at Norman Goodfellows, but you won't find it in too many commercial retailers. It's small stuff that's snapped up by collectors and sommeliers and lovers of fine wine, beautifully made. And that speaks to not just the wine at the Ex Animo Wine Fair this weekend, but in particular to the wine that is being presented by a great collection of winemakers on today's show. So in just a moment, we shall meet all of them, find out why the Ex Animo Wine Fair is such a grand event, and how you can get some of the very few remaining tickets. All that to come in a moment. First of all, though, let's have a quick look at some of the latest wine news. So this is happening down at Steenberg, their creators' dinners, where they're getting together with assorted people from the broader creative industry and drawing that parallel between the food and wine side of creation and creation in the arts, creation in other industries. Here, Ilunda Basson, who is the cellar master, will be joined by Kerry Kilpin. And if you've eaten Kerry's food before, you'll know she's making some rather fine stuff. If you've had the wine of Ilunda Basson, then you'll know that she's making some exceptional wine. Go back a bit and you will have found her at Niederberg making bubbles. She slipped effortlessly into place at Steenberg, and she'll be joined by Crystal Birch from the Hat Factory, by Kelly and Bettina from Me and B, the fashion brand, and from Bonula Kavula, local artist, sharing stories, inspiration, passion. 4 courses put together by Kerry and wines with them by Ilunda. That is at Bistro 1682, 750 Rand per person, with 50 Rand of that benefiting the Taking Care of Business platform. And that's Wednesday, the 30th of August, 6 or 6:30. If you'd like to go along, head over to the Steenberg website and they will more than happily assist. Now, the Wine Business Advisors, this is Mike Radcliffe when he's not on holiday in Greece or attending a Rugby World Cup or going skiing or doing many of the other things. Mike seems to somehow fit in to running the Villafonte empire, doing a superb job as chair of Stellenbosch Wine, and then running the Wine Business Advisors business. And he needed some help. Now, he's got plenty of it in the form of Roland Peets, who actually does all the work and is such a leading member of our wine community. But there is a new addition to the Wine Business Advisors. And that was announced, I think a little bit earlier on this week, perhaps it was last week, and that is a new member from the Marco Roux, who worked with Mike at Warwick, and this is from the viticultural side of things. He's worked all over the Cape, and so Marco will be joining the team. Welcome there. And it really is a successful and growing little business, Wine Business Advisors. They've also got a couple of wine farms on the market. Give Mike a shout if you're in the market for a small wine farm. Then this is coming up on Thursday of this week, Chef's Table at the Old Oak at Royal Johannesburg, Orpheus and the Raven. Cool name, cool labels, and very cool wine. This is a 5-course curated wine pairing dinner. Chef Ransley Peterson throwing caution to the wind with great success, as he always does. And there's some lovely wine to match some equally good food. That's this Thursday at the Old Oak. Okay, I said I'd tell you a little bit about Domain Skouras just before we jump into today's show and our guests. I was there a little earlier on today, having met Dimitris online a couple of times. Now, that is not Dimitris, that is Aris. Aris is the global export manager. They send a lot of their wine to the United States. About 1 million bottles a year they're making at Domain Skouras. And so he showed me around. That's the venue. You see it on the road as you're driving through from the highway south from Athens and then turn off towards Nafplio if you know your Peloponnese geography. And it was a chance to have a look, to try some of the wine, to meet the team inside. They've got a really slick, professional and inviting environment. That's part of the tasting room, showcasing some of the marketing that they have done over the years. The bottle of wine that the lady on the stepladder was looking at is their headline. That's their barrel cellar. It's a vast, vast space underground. They're making 1 million bottles of wine a year. Not surprising. It is rather substantial. Majority of French oak, a little bit of American. They've also putting some acacia in. And that's the range of wine. The Mega Ines on the far right, that's the Agriottico and Cabernet Sauvignon blend. But you start from the left, some Moscofilero with its deceptively sweet nose before you jump into something far more citrusy and savory. The Mavrofilero under the Salto name, which is even sharper. Definitely needs plenty of seafood with it. Some Assyrtiko from the Peloponnese, so not the island Assyrtiko, not quite as minerally and as driven and linear as some of the island Assyrtiko, but not far off at all. Some Chardonnay, some of their new Rosé, the Peplo. It's been going for 5 or 6 vintages now. That's a combination of Mavrofilero, Syrah, and Agriottico, about 1/3 each, and one in amphora, one in stainless steel, and one in acacia barrels. Couple of examples of Agriottico, and then, as I mentioned, that blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Agriottico. I've got a few bottles I've slipped into my luggage to bring home with me, but more examples of not just the quality of wine, but also the breadth of the varietals, the interpretations, and the fun they're clearly having with making wine in Greece, which means there is a shared philosophy with all of my guests today, because all of them have a great deal of fun making some exceptional wine. And everybody on the show today, as admittedly is often the case, produces wine I really, really enjoy drinking. They all fall under the label of Ex Animo, which is owned by one of the very few Australians we actually like. And he has gathered some of the forces who will be amassing for the Ex Animo Wine Fair this weekend. So in no particular order, David Clarke, lovely to have you back on the show, and a very, very warm welcome. Welcome to Jurgen, welcome to Lourens, welcome to Jessica. And there were rumors there was going to be a ginger giant on his typewriter / fax machine. Oh, he's there. Niels Verburg has joined us as well from somewhere in Botrefeer, probably halfway up a tree, waving a an iPhone 2 and getting signal. Guys, welcome to all of you. Lovely to have you on the show and celebrating, David, what's become a really, really exciting event where you haul together some of your star producers and drag them up to brave the dangers of Gauteng. Tell me a bit about the Ex Animo Wine Fair and what sets this particular occasion apart.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's thanks for having us. Very, very happy to be back on the Dan Nichols show. Very cool. So the Ex Animo Wine Fair, yeah. So it's an exciting event. It's the biggest event we do every year. We haven't done it for 4 years. The last big event in Josie we did was in 2019, back before the pandemic. Also, obviously in a rugby year, so that's exciting. But yeah, getting 20 of the Ex Animo producers up this weekend at Victoria Yards, over 80 wines. Got 3 great food producers or restaurants coming in to do some food. Got Tolakazi beer in there, some music pumping. So yeah, very, very exciting.
In terms of the wine that you're bringing up to Johannesburg, there is certainly a very strong population of wine drinkers in Johannesburg. It's the biggest domestic market by some distance, but it is a domestic market that drinks a lot of wine with which it is familiar. How much, other than wanting to support your own brands, is this driven by, let's showcase to the people of Johannesburg a lot of wine brands they won't know so well, some varietals they're maybe not that familiar with, and wine people who they really deserve to meet and to discover the wines of?
Yeah, I mean, as you've alluded to, a lot of the Ex Animo producers aren't making wine in supermassive quantities, which that was the genesis of Ex Animo, really, is trying to open these wines up to have South African access. So, because when we started, a lot of the producers we were working with were just doing exports and maybe a few cellar door sales, with a few exceptions. But most of the producers we worked with didn't really have a market in South Africa, but they had a massive market overseas. So all the producers we work with, we select on quality. That's about it. There's no real other criteria for what we select in, but yeah, it's interesting. Most of the bridges that we work with, we sort of sell out. I know that we've got Niels on board here. I mean, his Shiraz is one of the really marquee wines of the portfolio, and every year we've had to bring the release forward a little bit quicker because we end up selling out, which is good for some and not good for others, but it's a good problem to have, I guess. But the guys we've got on the show today, as you said, we've got Franco from Lourens family, we've got Jurgen from Interlago, and we've got Jessica from Saurwein. So all of their wines going to be on tasting on Saturday, and these are pre-release tastings. So these are going to be some of the first people in the country to come and taste those wines that won't be released until after the event to the public. So very exciting.
You've also got, in terms of the winemakers and guys today, an example, people are often making wine either from varietals not everybody is completely familiar with, or in styles that are perhaps a little different, a little more inventive, a little more exciting, a little more explorative. How much has the South African consumer changed in the time that you've been watching these wines go out, in terms of understanding them, welcoming them, be as happy to jump into a bottle of Jessica's Riesling as they were perhaps 10 years ago to just find a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and be happy with that?
Yeah, the South African industry today is almost unrecognizable as it was when we started 10 years ago almost 10 years ago in 2014. It's been amazing, the progress and the evolution of the South African wine scene. I mean, it's been absolutely crazy. As you say, I mean, Riesling is now taken seriously, whereas when we first started 10 years ago, it was just sort of this sweet thing that some people made, and it was what your tunny drank, or what your grandma drank. Jurgen's doing some really interesting things with skin contact whites. We tasted his wines in the trade this morning at Wine Cellar. So Elementus, Skin Contact Chenin, and Skin Contact Viognier. We have a heavy focus on sort of sustainable practices within the portfolio, not necessarily just organic or biodynamic, but sustainable. We don't want to be sort of ruining the world for the generations to come. So a lot of organically certified wines, wines that use sort of minimal intervention, wines that are picked earlier, so they don't have to have acidification, vineyards that are looked after, so the natural yeasts or the endemic yeasts can be used in fermentation rather than adding yeasts, and so on and so forth. There's some really, really exciting wines. I mean, Franco is doing some really great things from Picanierskloof, with some Palmino and some Grenache Noir. Yeah, it's amazing. He has his bit of obsession with Vidallo as well, which I don't think is shared by many people else in the industry. Maybe Morales from Memento, but it's a super exciting wine industry, and feel very privileged to be able to be a small part of that and be able to show it and showcase it to the wine lovers of Gauteng on the weekend.
All right. Well, the range of wine that will be showcased on Saturday has been touched on in part by David. Let's go over to one of the producers already mentioned. And her big smile is not just because of the excitement of getting up to Johannesburg, but also because there are new releases about to touch down. Jessica, welcome back to the show. Lovely to have you here. I got an email announcing the arrival imminently of some more terrific wine. Tell me a little bit about the latest vintage and what is touching down.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be back on the show, and I'm really excited to be in Joburg. As you've mentioned, I haven't been for some time, and my new wines are ready to be shown. I've got a Chi Riesling 2023 vintage, which is out and ready to be enjoyed. I think as the spring comes out, usually my wines start to boast a bit. So Chi Riesling is an off-dry expression of Riesling with a lovely floral fruity note. And then I'm showing my two Pinot Noirs, which are site-specific. So I have one vineyard in the Heelon-Ader Ridge appellation, which is quite close to the ocean and at 300 meters above sea level. And then I have a Elandskloof Pinot Noir, which is the Nom Pinot Noir, and that's also the 22 vintage, which is more inland and at very high altitude, 700 meters above sea level. So two different expressions. The one is more sort of lean and focused and structured, and the other one is more opulent and texture driven. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the audience and presenting my wines and answering any questions that may arise.
And doing so in some pretty cool company, because the guys who surround you at an event like this, it's not a massive event. It's very hand-picked in terms of David's stable of superstars. How much does that add to not just the experience for you, but also the experience you feel for the audience who come along, given that there's a definite thread to the nature of the producers who are on show?
Absolutely. And it makes it so much more thrilling as a producer. We don't get often the opportunity to actually communicate directly our product to the market, simply because we're always so wrapped up actually doing the hard work, either fingers in the soil or fingers on the vine or whatever is required, or in the wine, in fact. So it's going to be great to interact with an audience which David has built, which is educated to a certain extent, that knows which questions to ask and which is really interested in what we have to speak about. So thanks, David, also for your incredible, unwavering attitude of being avant-garde in all ways.
I remember chatting to you at Cape Wine, which seems both yesterday and a million years ago at the same time. And I think we had a conversation around one of the biggest challenges being that you had to smile and serve up your wine while looking enviously at all the other stands where you wanted to go and try everybody else's wine. How difficult is that going to be this weekend?
I think we'll make a plan. I'm sure afterwards or before there'll be some time. And I think we're going to gather together the night before as well, which might mean that we pitch up a little bit jolly on the day. No, I'm sure it's going to be incredible. And I know a lot of the wines, so I'm fortunate to drink a lot of these incredible producers' wines myself.
Well, if they get Jessica's seal of approval, they can't be too bad at all. Let's jump over to Franco and the Lourens family wines. Just before we dig into some of the wines and the showcase that's ahead this weekend, give us a little bit of the backstory, Franco, how the Lourens family wines came about.
Hey Dan, thanks for having me today. Good to see you again. Last time I saw you, I had a racing car suit on at Cape Wine. So yeah, this is what I really look like in real life. Yeah, just about Lourens Family Wines. It's a bit of a one-man show. It's myself, and then my lovely wife is not directly involved, but putting so much effort in and taking care of the family when I travel, and just being the supporter all the way. So it's a family business after all. It's small. We produce 4 wines. We try to focus on 2 blends, a white blend and a red blend. The white blend is sort of a picture into the Western Cape. We try to make a wine that represents the Western Cape, and it's Chenin, it's Verdelho, it's Grenache Blanc, there's Palomino, there's Colombard in there. And then on the red side, it's a Swartland blend that we focus on one region, and that's driven by Grenache and a bit of Cinsault and Syrah. And then from the other 2 wines, we got 2 single vineyard wines that we make from the Pickenierskloof area, which is just a fantastic area which I fell in love with a while ago, and it is just a phenomenal place. So from there, I get a single vineyard Chenin Blanc from Old Vineyards up there, and I do a Grenache Blanc, Grenache Noir, sorry, from there up there as well.
My apologies. You might have heard in the background that was a 92-year-old member of a local Greek biker gang just racing past. I think he was trying to catch some of Franco's wine feedback there as well. The white blend, the Lindy Carine, a number of grapes in there. Many people have never heard of, never drunk Palomino, Verdelho in particular. They're grapes we don't see a huge amount of. What was it about these, in particular Verdelho? David, referencing your interest in Verdelho. What was it about these that really reached out and grabbed you?
Yeah, yes, Dan, to be honest, when I worked at a previous winery a few years ago, a long time ago, and the winemaker said to me, I'm allowed to make anything in the winery, except the varieties that we're using in the winery itself. I worked at that stage. Needless to say that we made basically all the varieties in South Africa in that winery. So I actually found a bit of Verdelho on a little tasting note that I saw, and ever since I just love the variety. The reason why I love it so much is the fact that it suits my wine making style very well, in the fact that it's got high natural acidity. It got low pHs, so it makes the wines nice and safe. So it's a wine and it's a variety that's really the backbone of the white blend. That's where the freshness comes from. It's where the natural acidity comes from. It is, it's a good variety that can, that suits our climates and our regions. So I think it's a variety that you're probably going to hear a lot more going into the future. But I think the fact that it suits my style and it's a variety that works over here was the thing that really caught my attention.
And I'd love to have you in Greece and run through some of the white grapes I've been drinking over the last little while. I think you'd strike a chord with many of them as well over here, and possibly some of the winemaking styles, because talking to some of the winemakers here, there are guys who are very focused on that minimalist intervention, on not filtering, on keeping things as natural as they possibly can. And that's also pretty fundamental to your philosophy, Franco.
Yeah, I would say we pretty lazy winemaker. We only interfere when it's necessary. But yeah, I think from the whole business side, our philosophy is making wines that's made in a minimal intervention way, but also wines that show where they're from. Wines that got personality, wines got a bit of freshness, and I think wines that represents my family and myself. I think that's very important. That's the one thing that distance you from other brands and other wines. But in the winery, we pretty hands off, but we're always open-minded about producing a world-class wine that's proper, if I can call it that.
Well, if you're lucky enough to have a ticket, you'll be able to experience those wines yourself this weekend. How excited are you, Franco, about this gathering, about being part of the Ex Animo Wine Fair on Saturday?
Yeah, yes, Dan, I'm pretty excited. I haven't been in Joburg for a while. I haven't seen a lot of people lately. A lot of these people have been supporting me for years, and with the whole COVID and not being able to go up there as often as I would like, I'm very excited. I'm also very excited to see the rest of the Ex Animo crew. You know, even though we all are down here, most of us are in the Western Cape, you know, but it's good to see my fellow producers and being, you know, spending some time with them as well. So I'm really looking forward to the event and seeing the people up there and the other producers.
Well, one of those other producers you'll be able to see is the man who sent me a note saying, Dan, do not mention that you've seen me in a pink tutu, and do not under any circumstances show the photo. And we will, of course, show the photo before the end of the show. The man in question is the mayor of Bottrefeer. Niels, lovely to have you back on the show, and welcome. Give us an update on Bottrefeer for 2023. How was the vintage? How are things looking?
Yeah, everything's looking good. Glad to hear you've been at Skoras. I was there in 2016. Also a good spot. And yeah, I think that whole Peloponnese is underrated. Yeah, Bottrefeer, loving the rain. Yeah, we are one of those regions that just gets passed over when it comes to rain. So loving that. And I think that bodes well for the next vintage, 2024. 23, we're very happy with. Still very, very positive about the whites. It's a bit too early to tell what the reds are going to do. They need a bit more time in barrel to settle down, but all looking really, really positive. So, yeah, we certainly can't complain. I think there's some unbelievable wines coming out of Bottrefeer. And, you know, talking about smaller regions, I think one of the nicest things about going to the Ex Animo show in Joburg is that there's you know, there are wine regions that people have never heard of either, or let's call it wards. Region is a big area, but certainly the wine wards of, you know, Pekingese Kloof, you know, Sondagskloof, all those sort of smaller regions that they wouldn't get to taste, they're going to get a chance to taste with those interesting varietals. So that's always an added excitement to it. And yeah, as you mentioned right in the beginning, it's you know, it's a very, very important market to South Africa. Joburg is where it all happens, and yeah, it's Franco was saying he's looking forward to seeing the other producers. It's always dangerous seeing the other producers. We never really, you know, we're all in the wine industry, we're all busy, but the only time we really get to spend some time together is when we have a portfolio tasting like we're having, or a show like the Ex Animo show in Joburg. So yeah, it's it can also be dangerous, but great fun, and also awesome to see what all the fellow winemakers are up to, the wines they're making. There's great excitement always.
And Niels almost inferring that somebody else is responsible for it being dangerous when he is normally the fulcrum of all the danger at these sorts of gatherings. And a gathering that will be, as you say, loads of fun. Great to see everybody, great to taste lots of really cool wine. But how much does a producer like yourself need to be there in terms of the sales? Because to try and get hold of a bottle of Luddite Shiraz is almost impossible. The Chenin Blanc is not that far behind. You might get some Saboteur if you're lucky. You've got an incredibly successful brand. You've put a huge amount of work into it over the years, but your wine is pretty much sold the moment it's made. So what is the need to keep going to events like this, to keep showcasing the wine, given that your wine is already so popular?
You've always got to go and see your customers. You've got to go and show face. You must never have that little wine left that there's nothing to show people to taste and to buy. Obviously, we are out of stock on the farm, but David's very good at squirreling away a bit of wine to show. So I'm very excited about that. I phoned him, I said, I'm a bit concerned that we won't have any Shiraz to show, but we will be showing that. The Saboteurs, luckily, we have some decent volumes of. But I think the first mistake you can make as a producer or winemaker is when you think you don't need to be in the public eye. It's the first thing you do to shoot yourself in the foot in a big way. You've got to get out there. You've got to show your wines. You've got to show the new releases. It's very important to be out there and to meet your customers. Which we learn a lot from our customers, what they like. The people that follow our wines are looking forward to the next vintage to see what style the next vintage is in, because with our sort of non-irrigation, every vintage tells a story, and that's quite important as well. So I think the excitement of seeing the new release or the new vintage also helps. but you've got to get out there. If you ever think you don't need to go out there, you're dead in the water.
Learning a lot from your customers, also learning a lot from your fellow producers. How much are you still, despite your many years in the industry, picking up from your fellow winemakers, from some of the young guns coming through, about the not just the styles of wine being made, but the approach to the production of wine, the sustainability of wine? How much of that exchange of information, that learning from each other, continues to go on?
Well, I still think of myself as a young gun. So, Dan, I won't take offense to it. No, it's probably one of the most important things in wine. I did an interview the other day, and I said the beauty is that we get to travel, we get to taste wines from around the world, and you can never taste enough, you can never learn enough about wine. It's one of the most fascinating subjects in the world. And it's one of those subjects that you'll never ever know anything about. I mean, it continues to fascinate us all as winemakers. We are always trying to make that perfect wine, which doesn't exist, but we still try. And the only way to try and to get it, get better at doing it, is by talking to other winemakers, exchanging ideas, which is always important, and tasting each other's wines. And there's no better portfolio than the Ex Animo portfolio. Also, we've got to make it work, and we're making some really exciting wines, which makes it compelling to go to.
There was a mention from David at the start of the show to say that he can't believe just about that it's the same wine country in terms of the one he started out in. How much over the still very young and still just beginning wine career of Niels Verburg have you seen the market change, seen the South African consumer change in terms of an understanding of wine and a sense of adventure in terms of what we drink?
Yeah, it's an ongoing journey. I think to educating people to drink wine more and more and more. I think our per capita consumption seems to come down every year, but there's a growing interest in wine. There's a growing middle class, and the wine scene changes all the time. Without mentioning cultivars that come in and out of fashion, wine styles. There's definitely a drive to more lighter, fruitier, more in the terms of sort of my younger producers, more smashable wines that you can just enjoy a glass of without having to think too much about, but still have unbelievable quality to them. So that's I suppose the biggest change has been people realizing that if you buy quality and you've got to spend a bit more money to do that, you're going to get rewarded. But the style of red wines has certainly become lighter. I think white blends has become a very big category and a lot very, very exciting. So that's awesome, and it just continues to change. And to go back to the first question, you've got to carry on tasting and seeing what's out there to be able to move with those trends without losing your identity, let's call it.
Expect plenty of tasting on Saturday, not just from the people who've bought their tickets to get along. Completing our very esteemed lineup of guests this week is Jurgen from Intellego. Jurgen, very warm welcome to you. Thank you for being on the show today. Give us a little bit of background on Intellego and on the philosophy behind the wine that you make.
Hi, Dan. Thank you very much. Appreciate the chat and everything to be present today. I would say the philosophy is there's a big focus on the farming aspect in the wine. And it's like I mentioned this morning as well to a lot of consumers and stuff, that for us, it's all about transferring that energy from the vine into the bottle and then also into the glass, so that the consumer can get a very good idea of what we're trying to do, and that's also why when you ask Niels now the question about, isn't it important that the producers also are present whenever they do these tastings? And I think it is, because we can tell the story the best and also bring across the whole thing so that the consumer at the end of the day understand what we're trying to do. And I think for me, explaining how we farm it, and then also the kind of like more minimalistic approach to the wines itself in the winery, and then, having the final product in bottle is super important. So we only work with fruit around in the Swartland area. But it's nice for me working with the same blocks now for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, because we start to see the real potential of these vineyards and the grapes. and also the quality of the fruit. And then it's a learning process, and it's very nice to be part of that. And somebody once told me, and they said to me, let's say you do 50 vintages in your life. It's basically 50 chances that you get. So every vintage is a chance. And for me, it's always super interesting to see how differently the challenges are when it comes to the different vintages. For instance, 2023 compared to 2022. Some challenge you a bit more than others. But I think also with the Interlego wines, we're definitely trying to showcase wines that shows vintage variation. Because for me, that's super exciting, you know, whenever I drink wines from the different vintages, and just to see how expressive these wines are and how much of a story they can actually tell you about what was going on during that vintage. And then I think us as producers, we're just trying to back that up, trying to get that story across. But I think for me at Interlego, the fundamental is the soil, how we farm it, you know, the quality of the fruit, make sure that we work with pristine quality. And then also in the winery, when we make the wines, to do as little as possible intervention, but still at the end of the day to make sure that you get a product out there that is in a very good condition, something that will hold its own, and still something that's got a lot of personality, and also the identity of the Swartland. I think that's kind of like also a big philosophy for me, or, you know, it's like to make sure that these wines speak of the Swartland. So I think that, that's probably more or less what we stand for, and also when it comes to these wines.
Niels spoke about still learning from other winemakers, and that's a process that will never end. Your influences, you've worked a lot with people like Jurgen, with people like Craig Hawkins. I'm not sure if you worked more with Paul Giordano, surfed more, but you've certainly spent plenty of time together. How much have people like that influenced your understanding of an approach to the wine that you are making today?
I think they all had a big influence. I think wherever you work, you must always try to take something from there. I think I was also very fortunate enough that I worked with Tom Libber from Matassa in France, who back in the day used to do the observatory label. And I think I learned quite a lot from him as well. So I think they all had a big influence on maybe not the style I make it, but also to see how they did it, to taste with them, and also, you know, to learn from their philosophy. And I think you take a little bit from everybody, and then eventually you make up this big reference of actually what the reference are for your wines. So I think those outside influences are very important. But I think at the end of the day, the nice thing about the South African wine industry is, like, I think we all are doing very well, and we all trying to create our own identities. So it's not like there's no copycat, or, you know, we're not trying to copy other winemakers and stuff. But I mean, it's just a very nice industry to be in, the South African wine industry, and also share with friends and speak to other winemakers, and, you know, guys that's more experienced than us. You know, it's even, you know, speaking to Peter Ferreira sometimes is for me really cool, you know, because just also to learn of him and to see all the knowledge he's got, and you know, his whole take on the industry as well, and the winemaking and stuff. So I think it's an industry where it's important that you learn of others. But I also think in South Africa, if I look at the rest of the world, I think really there's a nice tight bond in the South African wine industry. And it's quite cool to see how, you know, people feed off each other. And I think that's very important at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, it's about brand South Africa. And I think that's an important factor. And it's great to be part of the industry at the moment, and to see how the quality of wines are just improving year by year. And just to be a part of it. So very fortunate, yeah.
I know it's very serious winemaking, and you put a lot of time and effort into it, but that's offset by a very playful approach to both your labeling and your names. If you're going this weekend and you're looking out for the Interlego wines, it won't be hard to spot, because they've got some seriously cool labels. Tell us about that aspect of what you do, coming up with things like the pink moustache, and coming up with labels like the Kolbroek, where they're very, very hard to miss, and they just speak of fun and enjoyment and playfulness.
I think it's also, for me, it's like it's a bit of a different approach. Like you can see behind me, there are quite a few classical labels and stuff. And I really enjoy the more classical and more standard labels. But I think for me, when I started making wines, I was really into colorful labels. You know, it just tells a different story. I think sometimes wine can be too serious. Some people can take it way too serious. You know, there's also a lighter side towards the wines. And I think I try to express myself through these labels, because within each of these colorful labels, you know, there's a story behind every label, and also a story behind the name. So maybe also because I don't own any vineyards or anything at the moment, so we buy in fruit, and then also we rent vineyards to farm ourselves. And I think where maybe Niels can speak about how they grow the Syrah, the Shannon at Verburg on the farm, Ludite. For me, it's maybe a chance to showcase that through my labels, to tell people the story behind the label, behind the name. So I think it's just different ways of living out what I'm trying to do. But at the end of the day, it's also important for myself that I enjoy it. You know, enjoy doing the labels, working with the different color teams, also with the names, and make that connection between the name and the style of wine and the wine that we do make. And it's amazing also the moment people buy into the story, they really like it, they enjoy it. And I think it's almost like when they leave that tasting room or your table, you know, it's almost like it's stuck in their mind and they won't forget it. So I think it's also about visualization. So yeah, there's quite a few factors that we took into account when I started going this route. But like I said, I think at the end of the day, it's a lot about energy. For me, it's a lot about positive energy, transferring energy. I think colorful labels as well, you know, and that all buys into that. So I think enjoy it, having fun, enjoy it. It's still serious, but at the end of the day, I think also, you know, you must really enjoy it. You know, it's like with life with all of us. I mean, you're sitting there overseas having a great holiday right now, and you're enjoying it, and that's the reason why you're there. So yeah, I think that's kind of like where we go with the labels.
It's an approach that puts you in like-minded company on Saturday. There's that pink moustache we spoke of a moment ago. That's almost Niels-like, really. What's really exciting you about this weekend, about coming together with the rest of the Ex Animo tribe, Jurgen, for the wine fair on Saturday?
Well, I mean, it's funny how we all live in the same country, but you see each other only once a year. So, you know, in June I had to go to London to see Niels because we've got the same importer there, and that was good fun. And it's just always good fun to mingle with these people. I think we are also, all of us are pretty like-minded when it comes to the style of wines that we make and how we do our wines and stuff and what we're trying to achieve. And it's just a bunch of nice people, you know, like I said, you know, just to hang out with them and also to taste their wines, because we don't always get these opportunities to taste their wines from other producers. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, also to be there with the consumer, to tell the story, to speak to them. And I mean, we're also very grateful for the consumer that they support us year in and year out. And I think the least we as producers can do is to go there and showcase our wines and chat a bit to the people and tell them and give them a bit more info, let's say about the 2022 vintage or 23, whenever. Because I think also the more info the people get, the consumer they get from us, I mean, the better they will understand the wines. And I think also, yeah, then they will appreciate so much more. And at the end of the day, you know, I think it's super important that the consumer walks out there happy. And for us at the same time, being with a bunch of great people, we really enjoy it as well. So it's always a highlight of the year to go out to Joburg and to showcase the wine and also to see how passionate the people up there are about wines. That's one thing I must say. Super passionate. They love their wines, and obviously in the Western Cape we're a bit spoiled because everything happens down here. But it's always nice to mingle there with the Joburg people as well. And yeah, they're just a different breed, a very nice breed. So yeah, very cool.
It is shaping up to be an incredibly special day on Saturday, the Ex Animo Wine Fair, which we're celebrating on Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows today. I've got some rather good news coming up in just a second regarding some of the wine. But before I give that out, let's jump back, first of all, to Niels. Niels, outside of your own wine, give me one or two, for no particular reason, that you're really looking forward to trying in between dishing your own wines out to everybody this Saturday. What are one or two of the other wines that you're really itching to get a taste of?
Yeah, I must say Jessica's Riesling is one of them. We very seldom get a chance to taste good Riesling coming from South Africa, so that'll certainly be one of them. And I don't know if Craig's released his latest Shannon, but I've always been a fan of Craig Hawkins, I'm talking about. He's Chenin Blanc, and probably Mr. Vessels as well from Restless River, to see if his latest wines up to scratch. I spend a lot of time with him, but I don't spend a lot of time drinking his wine.
You can rectify it this weekend. Craig Hawkins with his Testa Longa and his Shannon, Jessica's Riesling, and the wines of Craig Hawkins, that Cabernet Sauvignon in particular, always a rock star wherever it lands. Franco, what about you? What are one or two of the other wines outside of your own that'll be top of the list when you get a chance to sneak away and do some tasting?
Sure, Dan. It's pretty much impossible to pick one or two wines. I think, the beautiful thing about the whole Ex Animo portfolio is that we got everything from bubbles to skin contact to reds to whites to anything that you can imagine. So I think, the beautiful thing about it is that all the producers specialize in what they do. So there'll be a flavor for you for whatever your choice is, whatever your preferences is. I'll be around at all the people. I'll be tasting at least one or two of all of them. So impossible to say which one specifically. But I can just tell everybody that's coming on Saturday that you're going to be so spoiled for choice. And I reckon everything you're going to be tasting is going to be world-class.
That's a bit, Franco, a bit like listening to Nas Puerta at halftime of a rugby match, sitting very firmly on the fence and being as polite and diplomatic as possible. But we'll tell you, basically, Franco's just going to drink everything and get his hands on. I think that's effectively what he's saying. Let's see if we can get slightly more of a distinct opinion from Jurgen. Jurgen, are there a couple of wines, maybe just you haven't tried them before, you haven't tasted them in ages, or you've heard a lot from somebody else? Anything in particular that's on your radar for Saturday?
Then, yeah, for me, I would not say anything particular, but it's always nice for me to taste the wines from, let's say, regions like Water River or Hemel that's a little bit further away. We don't always get to taste those wines. So also to see the vintage variation in those wines. Because, I'm based in the Swartland, so tasting the wines from Craig and Johan Meyer and those guys, it's pretty easy. I've got access to that. So it's always to see for me in different regions how differently the wines are, and also are they showcased differently, during those specific vintages? Because I think, once again, it's kind of like a learning school where I get to taste, for instance, the wines from Craig Wessels. I really enjoy his wines, his cabs, and also the Shannons and then the Pinot Noirs and stuff, which we don't get in the Swartland because also of the climate, and we don't really work with cab, Pinot Noir, those varietals in this area. So it's always nice and exciting for me to taste something new, something different, something that's not really... that's something that's here in the Swartland. So I would say definitely Hemel. It's always very cool to taste this more cooler climate wines, especially also because we're here in the Swartland from a more warmer climate. So I think region-wise and also climate-wise, for me, it's very exciting to go and taste those producers' wines. That's quite a bit different from what we have here in the Swartland. So yeah, so I think it's probably Hemel. I think, yeah, that's always for me very exciting to taste those wines and the fruit, and also to see what influence the vintage had on those wines.
The beauty of South Africa's regional diversity, emphasized there by Jurgen, who was the only person who listened to my request to please wear a pink, blue, and white checked shirt on the show. So thank you, Jurgen. Let's finish off with Jessica and her thoughts there. Jessica, what are you looking out for on Saturday beyond your own wine?
Okay, so I think it'll have to be Lucas van Locherenberg's Syrah. He makes an incredible Syrah called the Graft, and I'm really hoping he's going to have a bottle open of that. I'm sure he will, somewhere under the table perhaps. And then you were talking about Franco Lourens' whites, and that Lindy Carine that I've had in the past has just been incredible. So I can't wait to taste the new vintage of that.
All right. Just as so many people cannot wait to taste the new vintages of Jessica's wines, which will be available pre-release for tasting this Saturday, which leads into some rather exciting news because after some arm twisting and some persuasion, we have managed to convince Jessica to release some wine, and it'll be a small amount, but there is going to be, and I'm very excited about this, Jessica, some of the new range of Saurwein available in September on the Dan Really Likes Wine store with Norman Goodfellows.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to being available there. It's been a while since I've been in Joburg, and I'm so excited that the wines will be available right there on your platform.
All right, we'll keep an eye out from September on the Dan Really Likes Wine store with Norman Goodfellows, and I suspect there might be some other Ex Animo producers on the horizon as well. Speaking of which, let's go back to Mr. Clarke. With such a great collection of producers, David, so many wonderful wines on show, are there any tickets left? And if so, how do we get hold of them?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, there are some tickets left. Just go to our website, exanimo.coza. We're going to have a little bit of tickets available on the door as well. So we're going to keep some available on the door. I can just let Niels know that the Testalonga wines, so Craig Hawkins, both Craigs are coming up, Hawkins and Vessels. Testalonga is bringing some of his Chenin, so he's bringing in Magnum. So we've sold out of his current vintage. But he's bringing some, I think, 2017 and 2022 Magnums to taste. So that's just out of his generosity. So which would be very cool. And rest assured are bringing their complete set of new wines that will only be available in October. So that's the Chardonnay, the Ave Marie, the Cabernet, the Main Rate of Dignity, and the new Pinot Noir, the Luc that hasn't been available for a couple of years. So very exciting. But yeah, exanimo.co.za is where you get tickets. They're $4.95 all inclusive for the wines, so in free parking down there. The beer and food is for everyone's own account. But yeah, very exciting. From doors open at 11 and close at 4, so we can all have an afternoon beverage afterwards.
It promises to be a fantastic afternoon. Just before we let you go, David, with thanks as usual, give me a quick reminder. Did I see that the Ex Animo Wine School is open for business again?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Dan. So we had our first course last month. It ended in August. Had a really great response. So we're running it again in October. I think it starts in the second week of October, but again on the website there. So it's a 4-week. There you go. So 11th, 18th, 25th, and 1st of November here in Woodstock in Cape Town. So 2 hours each session there. It runs over 4 consecutive Wednesdays, and we run through basics of South African wine, introduction to South African wine. There's so many wine courses out there that sort of skim over South Africa. We thought we'd do one that focuses mostly on South Africa, and hopefully people can spend their money better when they get to at a wine shop or a restaurant. So yeah, and so lots of fun, lots of great wines, some wines from the guys that we've been speaking to this afternoon as well. So yeah, very exciting.
And as you'll have seen from the duration of today's show, David, despite being Australian, has really worked on his English. It's come on remarkably, and so you'll be able to get through that course absolutely fine. David, thank you very much, not just for putting together a stellar guest list for us today, but also for putting together another terrific wine celebration this Saturday, the Ex Animo Wine Fair. And a big thank you to Jessica, whose wines will be available in September on Dan Really Likes Wine, and to Franco, and to Jurgen, and to Niels. Guys, thank you all very much. Best of luck. I can see you guys counting down from about 2:30 till you get to that 4 o'clock mark, so you can all start opening your own wine and celebrating with each other. Have a terrific Saturday. As much as I will be enjoying Greek sunshine, I'm very sorry to be missing out on this one. So David, please make sure you speak to me first before you confirm the date for next year, because I definitely don't want to miss this one.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, Dan. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
Yes,
Thank you
guys,
so
have a
much.
lovely time in Johannesburg.
Thank
Thanks
you
for joining us. A very special edition from the little Greek seaside town of Verburg in the Peloponnese of Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, ahead of an extraordinary afternoon of wine in Johannesburg. The Ex Animo Wine Fair, producers like Jessica Saurwein, like Niels from Luddite, like Jurgen from Interlego, like Franco from Lourens Family Wines, and so many others, many of them mentioned through the course of today. Get to exanimo.co.za for the last few tickets. If you're in Johannesburg, it is a really wonderful portrait of a side of South African wine you might not have seen too much of. This will sort that out for you on Saturday. That wraps us up for today. I've got a beach to go and find because this is Greece and there's still a good 2.5 hours of warmth and sunshine. I might have a glass of Moscofilero, Sirtico, Molangasia to find before the evening is out. I will see you back on the show on Thursday, where a number of Greek producers will update us on how wine is going here and on how some of the varietals that they're producing might fare as and when they join Assyrtiko and Zino Mavro and Hereotico in the vineyards of South Africa. Also, look out on our platforms. Last week's episode of the magazine show featuring Breen Sauls from Tessa Larsdal and Bro Raats with his new releases, plus some wine at the Beverly Hills. And there'll be a brand new show up online tomorrow as well. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy the Ex Animo Wine Fair. Should you be there, tag us, send photos. We'd love to see how it goes. And I'll see you back live once again from Greece on Thursday. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Have a good evening. Goodbye.